The day I lost my lunch and found my faith. I didn't know my name would never be written down. I didn't know thousands would eat because of what I carried in my hands. All I knew was that my mother packed my lunch that morning, 5 small loaves, 2 dried fish, and told me not to share it with strangers. Then I met Jesus. My mother woke me before the sun, not with shouting, but with the quiet urgency that meant the day mattered. "Eat before you go," she said, pressing warm bread into my hands. 5 loaves, small, rough, still smelling of smoke from the fire. 2 fish, dried and salted, wrapped in cloth. "It's not much," she added, tying the bundle tight, "but it's enough for you." I didn't know then how heavy enough could be. The village was already buzzing. People were leaving their homes, moving in one direction like water pulled by an unseen tide. Everyone whispered the same name, Jesus. Some said he healed the sick. Some said he spoke like God remembered us. Some said he was dangerous. I was just curious. I followed the crowd out beyond the fields, my feet dusty, my stomach already reminding me the day would be long. The hill where they gathered was wide, sloping gently toward the lake. By the time I arrived, people were everywhere. Men, women, children, the old and the broken. Thousands. I tightened my grip on my lunch. Then I saw him. He didn't stand higher than anyone else. He didn't shout. But when he spoke, the noise around him softened, as if the air itself leaned in to listen. He talked about the kingdom of God, not like the teachers in the synagogue, not with rules and distance. He spoke like someone who knew us. Hours passed. The sun climbed. People grew restless. I heard stomachs growl, mine loudest of all. I remembered my mother's voice. "Don't share it with strangers." I tucked the bundle closer to my chest. Then the murmuring changed. He should send them away. There's no food. Look how many there are. I saw his disciples moving through the crowd, worry etched into their faces. One of them, Andrew, I later learned, stopped near me. He looked tired, hungry. "What do you have?" he asked gently. I froze. The bundle in my hands suddenly felt heavier than a stone. I thought of my mother. I thought of the long walk home. I thought of how small my lunch was compared to this sea of people. 5 loaves, 2 fish, not enough, or so I thought. My hands trembled as I held it out. This is all I have," I whispered. Andrew stared at it, then at me, then back at the bread. He didn't laugh. He didn't dismiss me. He nodded, slow, thoughtful. And for reasons I still don't understand, he took it. I didn't know it then, but that moment, the moment I let go, was when my life changed forever. And everything my mother taught me about holding on was tested by a man
Andrew
who taught
carried
me
my
how
lunch
to
like
let
it might
go.
vanish if he held it too tightly. I followed him without thinking. People stared as we moved forward, some curious, some annoyed, most simply tired. Hunger had begun to sharpen their faces. Children cried, men shifted impatiently, women shaded their eyes, hoping for relief. I wanted my bread back. I wanted to disappear. Andrew stopped in front of Jesus. "There's a boy here," he said, lifting the bundle slightly, "who has 5 loaves and 2 fish. His voice trailed off. "But what are they among so many?" he added. I felt every eye turn toward me. My face burned. Jesus looked at the bread. Then he looked at me. Not past me, not over me, at me. His eyes were calm, steady in a way that made my chest tighten. "Thank you," he said. Not to Andrew, to me. Something loosened inside my chest. He didn't ask my name. He didn't ask where I was from. He didn't ask why I gave it. He simply accepted it as if it was already enough. "Have the people sit down," Jesus said. The disciples hesitated, then obeyed. Groups of 50, hundreds forming order out of chaos. I stood frozen. I had given away my food, and I was still hungry. Jesus took the bread. He lifted his eyes toward heaven, and he gave thanks. I had seen prayers before, quick, hurried ones spoken from habit. This was different. It was slow, intentional, grateful, for bread that could barely feed one boy. Then he broke it, once, then again, and again. The pieces didn't grow, not at first. They stayed small, ordinary, fragile. I almost laughed. This was it? This was the miracle everyone talked about? The disciples began passing it out. One basket, then another. Fish followed. People reached, ate, paused, ate again. I watched a man wipe tears from his beard as he chewed. I watched a child smile with bread in both hands. The baskets came back empty, then full, then heavier than before. I looked at my hands. They were empty, yet the world around me was suddenly full. Someone pressed bread into my palm, warm, real. I stared at it, heart pounding. This bread came from what I had given. Jesus passed by me as he spoke to others. For a brief moment, our eyes met again. He smiled, not like a king, like someone who knew what I was feeling. That day, everyone ate. Everyone. But I was the only one who knew the truth. The miracle didn't start in his hands. It started when a boy let go of what little he had and trusted it would be enough. By the time the sun began to sink, the hill was almost empty. Footprints marked the ground where thousands had sat. Crumbs lay scattered like small reminders of something impossible that had just happened. Laughter drifted away in pieces as families made their way home, full and amazed. I stayed. I didn't know why. The disciples moved among the grass, collecting what was left, basket after basket, full, 12 of them. I watched in silence, my heart louder than the voices around me. That morning, my mother packed one meal. Now there were leftovers enough to feed villages. I sat on a stone and ate slowly. Every bite felt different, not because the bread tasted better, but because I knew where it came from. From my hands, from my fear, from my choice. Jesus walked past me again, speaking softly with his disciples. I waited. I wanted to say something. But what do you say to the man who turned your smallness into abundance? Finally, he stopped. "You're still here," he said. I nodded. I didn't know where else to go. He smiled gently. "That's a good place to begin." We sat, just us. No crowd, no noise, no miracle happening in front of everyone. Only the quiet weight of what had already happened. "Were you afraid?" he asked. I hesitated, then told the truth. "Yes." He nodded. "So were they." I frowned. "But they're grown men." He chuckled softly. "Fear doesn't care about age." I looked down at my hands. They were shaking, I admitted. I thought I'd made a mistake. "And now?" he asked. I thought carefully. Now, I think, maybe holding on would have been the mistake. His eyes softened. Jesus stood and brushed dust from his robe. "Most people wait to be full before they give," he said. "But the kingdom works the other way around." He paused, then added, "You gave before you understood." Before he walked away, he turned once more. "Go home," he said, "and when you are afraid again, remember this." I wanted to ask him what this meant, but he was already moving, the evening light folding around him. I walked back through the fields alone, but I wasn't empty. Not anymore. When my mother asked why I was late, I only said, "I met a man who knows what little things are worth." She didn't understand. Not yet. But someday she would. The village felt smaller when I returned, not because it had changed, but because I had. Every face seemed closer, every sound louder. Even the dust beneath my feet felt different, like it remembered where I had been. My mother noticed it immediately. "You're quiet," she said, handing me water. "Did you eat?" I nodded. She studied me the way mothers do, searching for what words refused to say. By morning, the questions had begun. "Were you there? Did you see him? Is it true everyone ate?" I tried to answer simply. Yes, yes, yes. But simple answers only made people lean in closer. At the well, two men argued loudly. "It couldn't have happened," one said. "Food doesn't multiply." The other shook his head. "My cousin was there. He ate until he was full." Their eyes turned to me. "You were there too, weren't you, boy?" My throat tightened. Yes. They waited. I wanted to tell them everything. I wanted to say it started with 5 loaves and 2 fish, with hands that shook and a heart that doubted. But the words stayed trapped inside me. That night, I lay awake listening to the village breathe. I replayed the moment again and again. Jesus' eyes, his voice, the bread breaking, and the fear that still clung to me. The next day, a neighbor stopped my mother. "They say your son was part of it." My mother looked at me, not with pride, with concern. "What did you do?" she asked quietly. "I gave him my lunch," I said. Silence stretched between us. "That was foolish," she said at last. "You could have gone hungry." "I did," I replied. She looked up sharply. "And?" I swallowed. "And everyone else didn't." She sat down slowly. For a long time she said nothing. Then she whispered, "Tell me about this man." So I did. Not about the miracle, but about the way he said thank you. Words grayed faster after that. Some looked at me with wonder, others with suspicion, a few with anger. "Why you?" they asked. "Why not us?" I didn't have an answer. I still don't. That evening, I stood outside and watched the road leading away from the village. I knew Jesus was already gone, but something inside me had started walking with him anyway. I realized then, miracles don't just fill stomachs. They separate hearts. Some move closer to faith, others step back in fear. And I was standing in the middle, a boy carrying a story too big for his hands. I learned quickly that being connected to a miracle does not make life easier. It makes it louder. People stopped me in the streets. Some smiled too widely. Some whispered my name like it carried power. Some looked at me as if I had stolen something meant for them. "You're the boy," they said, "the one with the bread." I nodded, even when I wanted to disappear. One afternoon, a man grabbed my arm. "Tell me," he demanded, "did he choose you?" The word choose scared me. "I don't know," I said, pulling free. "I was just there." He scoffed. "That's what all chosen people say." Others came quietly. A woman whose child was sick asked if I could touch him. An old man asked if I knew where Jesus had gone next. A merchant offered me money, real money, if I would tell the story again, but louder. I refused them all, not because I was holy, but because I was afraid. At home, my mother watched everything. "You're changing," she said one night. "So are you," I replied. She shook her head. "I'm afraid for you." "So am I whispered. That night, doubt returned like an old friend. What if it had been a mistake? What if I had imagined it all? What if I had given away the only thing I had and gained nothing but trouble? I held my hands out in the darkness. They looked the same, but they didn't feel the same. The next day, a group of boys followed me. "Do it again," one laughed. "Make food appear." I felt my face burn. "I can't," I said. They laughed harder. "Then what good are you?" I ran. Not far, just far enough to breathe. I sat beneath a tree and pressed my forehead to my knees. "I didn't ask for this," I whispered. For the first time since the hill, I wished I'd kept my lunch. Not because I was hungry, but because life before the miracle had been simple. And now, nothing was. As the sun dipped low, a thought struck me. Quiet, uncomfortable, true.
Jesus never promised safety. He never promised ease. He promised the kingdom. And the kingdom, I was learning, cost everything. I stood up slowly. I didn't know where Jesus was, but I knew one thing. I didn't want to go backward, even if forward meant fear. Silence is heavier than noise. I learned that in the days that followed. The questions faded, the crowds moved on, the whispers found new stories, and I was left alone, with no miracle happening in front of me anymore. I'd still woke early, still helped my mother, still walked the same dusty paths, but something inside me kept asking a question I didn't know how to answer. What now? I waited for Jesus to return. I watched the road every evening, half expecting him to appear as suddenly as he had vanished. He didn't. No voice from heaven, no bread multiplying in my hands, just ordinary days. One afternoon, my mother sent me to the market. As I walked, I passed a beggar, thin, trembling, eyes hollow with hunger. Before the hill, I would have looked away. That day, I stopped. I had no bread, no fish, no miracle, only time. I sat beside him. We didn't speak much, but when I left, his eyes were less empty, and mine were fuller. That night, doubt crept back in. If this was real, I whispered into the dark, then why does everything feel the same? No answer came, only the sound of my own breathing. Days passed, then weeks, and still nothing. I began to wonder if the miracle was for everyone else, not for me. Maybe I had only been a tool, used, forgotten. One evening, overwhelmed, I climbed a small hill outside the village, the closest thing I had to that day long ago. I sat alone as the sky deepened into stars. "Did I imagine you?" I asked the sky. The words tasted bitter. Then a memory rose, not of bread or crowds or baskets, but of a voice. Thank you. He had thanked me, before the miracle, before the understanding, before the proof. And suddenly I understood something that made my chest ache. Faith wasn't the miracle. Faith was the space before it. I didn't need another sign. I needed patience. I stood up slowly. I didn't know where Jesus was, but I knew one thing. I didn't want to go backward, even if forward meant fear. I heard his name when I wasn't listening for it. That's how it always seems to happen. 2 travelers arrived in the village just before sunset. Dust clung to their robes, and their voices carried the tired excitement of men who had seen something worth the journey. They spoke near the well. I wasn't trying to listen, but then I heard it. Jesus of Nazareth. My hands froze mid-motion. He healed a blind man, one said. In broad daylight, the other added, and the teachers were furious. My heart began to race. They talked about crowds again, about words that cut deeper than swords, about authority that didn't beg permission. Each sentence felt like a knock on my chest. He was still moving, still teaching, still calling people forward. That night, I couldn't sleep. The silence that once tested me now felt like a door cracking open. He wasn't gone. He was just ahead. The next morning, I told my mother, I want to follow him. She stopped what she was doing. For how long? She asked. I don't know. She studied my face, the same way she had when I was small and afraid of the dark. You won't be safe, she said. I know. You won't be certain, she continued. I know. She exhaled slowly. Then she nodded. She packed my bag the same way she always had. Bread, fish. This time she pressed it into my hands and said nothing. As I walked away from the village, fear returned. But it didn't stop me. It walked beside me. I followed stories, footprints, rumors, hope. I didn't know if I would see him again, but I knew this. The boy who once gave bread had learned something greater. Faith does not wait to be called. Faith goes. And somewhere ahead of me, the man who had said thank you
was still changing the world. I did not walk beside him, not like the 12, not like the women who traveled openly with him. I walked behind, far enough to watch, close enough to hear. Crowds made it easy to disappear. I blended into them. Another face, another pair of dusty feet. No one pointed at me anymore. No one asked for miracles. I was just a boy again. And for the first time in a long while, that felt like mercy. I saw him teach in villages smaller than mine. I heard him speak in parables, stories that sounded simple, but stayed with you long after the words ended. Seeds, fields, lost things. I understood them differently now. One afternoon, he spoke about giving. Whoever tries to save their life will lose it, he said, but whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. My fingers curled slowly. I had lost 5 loaves and 2 fish, and somehow found myself. At night, I slept near the edges of camp. I listened to disciples argue. I watched the sick approach with trembling hope. I saw the way he never turned anyone away, only towards something deeper. Once, our eyes met again, just for a breath. He didn't call me forward, didn't speak my name. He only nodded, as if to say, "I see you." That was enough. Fear traveled with us now. I heard whispers of anger, of plots, of leaders who didn't like the way he spoke with authority. Some nights the air felt heavy, like something was coming. I thought about leaving, going home, returning to quiet days. But every time I imagined it, something inside me resisted. I had already tasted the kingdom. I couldn't forget its flavor. One evening, as the crowd dispersed, a man beside me scoffed. "He'll get himself killed," he said. The word struck me harder than I expected. I looked towards Jesus, calm, unafraid. And suddenly I understood something terrifying and true. Following him did not mean safety. It meant surrender. I stayed, not because I was brave, but because once you've given everything once, holding back the second time feels impossible.
I had never seen fear move that fast. It spread through the crowd like a sickness, quiet at first, then impossible to ignore. Whispers turned sharp, soldiers appeared, and suddenly, following from a distance, felt too close. They took him at night, not with shouts, but with urgency. I watched from behind a wall as they bound his hands. I waited for the miracle, for fire, for angels, for bread to multiply into power. None came. Morning arrived too quickly. The city was restless, angry, confused. I pushed through the crowd until I could see him again. Beaten, bruised, silent. This wasn't how stories were supposed to end. "Crucify him!" The words struck like stones. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. I wanted the boy with the bread back, the one who believed miracles always came in time. They lifted the cross. I couldn't breathe. Each step he took felt like it landed on my chest. Blood marked the road. The sky watched. I stood far back on the hill, close enough to hear him struggle for breath, far enough to pretend I wasn't there. Shame wrapped around me tighter than fear. When they raised him up, the earth seemed to hold its breath. I remembered his hands, the way they had broken bread, the way they had lifted the poor and the broken. Now they were nailed. Darkness came in the middle of the day, not like clouds, like morning. The wind grew strange. People fell silent. I whispered, "Do something." Nothing happened. Then he cried out, and the sound shattered something inside me. Not faith, illusion. When he said, "It is finished," the ground trembled, the sky wept, and I finally understood. The miracle was never meant to stop the suffering. It was meant to redeem it. I left before they took him down. I couldn't watch hope die. Or so I thought. That night, I didn't pray. I didn't cry. I sat in the dark and held my hands open, empty again. And for the first time since the hill with the bread, I wondered if I had been wrong to believe. The world did not end that night. That was the cruelest part. Morning came, birds sang, vendors opened their stalls. Life moved forward as if nothing eternal had been broken. I felt like screaming at the sky for its calm. They said he was buried, a stone rolled into place, guards stationed, finality sealed with authority. Hope, it seemed, had been carefully contained. I wandered without purpose. I avoided the others who had followed him, too afraid of their grief, too unsure of my own. When I passed the places where he had taught, my chest tightened. I could still hear his voice, but it felt like an echo in an empty room. That afternoon, doubt became heavy. Not loud, heavy, like a weight that pressed on my breathing. Had I misunderstood everything? Had I mistaken kindness for divinity? Had I given my faith to a man who could still die? I thought of the bread, 5 loaves, 2 fish. I had believed small things mattered. Now even the greatest thing I had known lay wrapped in linen. I returned to the edge of the city as night fell. I sat alone and stared at the stars, waiting for them to rearrange themselves into meaning. They didn't. I tried to pray. The words felt useless. I tried to cry. Nothing came. Silence answered everything. And then I realized something terrifying. Faith without certainty feels like betrayal. Because certainty gives comfort, faith asks for trust anyway. I remembered his words. Whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. I had never understood them until now. Maybe the loss came first. I lay down on the cold ground. "I don't understand you," I whispered. The silence didn't change, but something in me did. For the first time, I chose to believe without evidence. Not because it felt good, but because I had nowhere else to go. That night stretched longer than any before it, but even in the silence, something was still moving.
It began with a rumor, the kind you'd dismiss without thinking, the kind hope is too afraid to touch. They say the tomb is empty. I heard it whispered before sunrise, passed between trembling voices like something fragile. I stopped walking. "What did you say?" I asked. The woman looked at me, eyes wide, breath unsteady. "The stone, it's moved. His body, gone." My first thought wasn't joy. It was fear. Fear of disappointment. Fear of hoping again. I had already watched hope die once. I followed at a distance, always at a distance. People ran toward the tomb, their footsteps louder than their prayers. I stayed back, heart pounding, afraid of what I might find or not find. When I arrived, the stone lay to the side, heavy, useless. The guards were gone. The tomb, empty. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. Emptiness can be louder than presence. Someone cried. Someone laughed. Someone fell to their knees. I stood frozen. "He said this would happen," a man whispered. The words struck me like lightning. He had. We just hadn't understood. I remembered the bread, how it broke without running out, how something impossible happened not by force, but by surrender. Death, I realized, was just another stone, and stones don't stop God. As the crowd scattered in confusion and awe, I lingered. My hands shook, not from fear this time, from recognition. Later that day, I heard he had appeared, not to kings, not to soldiers, to women who came weeping. I smiled through tears I hadn't known were waiting. Of course he did. I didn't see him that day, or the next, but the silence was different now. It wasn't empty. It was expectant. Hope returned, not loud, not triumphant, but alive. And I understood something deeper than any miracle. The bread didn't multiply because it was special. It multiplied because it was given. And so was he. I wasn't looking for him. That's the truth. I had learned what disappointment felt like when hope reached too far ahead of reality. So I stayed close, but careful.
Belief now felt like something I held with both hands, gently. I was walking along the edge of a field when I heard my name, not spoken loudly, not shouted, spoken the way someone says your name when they already know you're listening. I turned. He stood there, alive, whole, unhurried. For a moment I couldn't move. My body forgot how. This wasn't the man from the cross. This wasn't the silence of the tomb. This was Jesus. "You followed," he said. I nodded, unable to speak. "From a distance," he added, not as a rebuke, but as an understanding. "I didn't know if I was allowed to be closer," I finally whispered. He smiled. "You were never far from me." My chest tightened. I hadn't known how much I needed to hear that. He gestured for us to sit. The ground felt holy beneath us, not because it glowed or trembled, but because he was there. "Do you still carry bread?" he asked gently. I shook my head. "Not today." "That's all right," he said. "You already gave what mattered." I dared to look at him fully now, at the hands that still bore marks, at the eyes that had seen death and passed through it. "Did it hurt?" I asked quietly. He didn't rush the answer. "Yes," he said, "but love often does." I swallowed hard. "I thought I lost everything when you died." He looked at me with the same steady gaze I remembered from the hill. "You lost your certainty," he said, "but not your faith." The wind moved through the grass. Birds sang somewhere nearby. Life had resumed, but it no longer felt careless. It felt redeemed. He stood. Before leaving, he placed a hand briefly on my shoulder. Not heavy, not dramatic, real. "Feed others the way you were fed," he said. "Not just with bread, but with trust." Then he was gone. Not vanished, just moving on. I stayed seated for a long time, smiling, crying, breathing in a world that finally made sense again. I was never named in any story, never counted among the 12, but I was remembered, and that was enough. Years passed, not loudly, not marked by miracles everyone could see, just lived. I grew older, my hands hardened with work, my voice deepened, my steps slowed, but the memory never faded, not of bread, not of silence, not of a tomb that refused to stay sealed. I was never famous, never followed by crowds, and yet I was never the same. I married, had children, taught them how to fish, how to break bread, how to give before understanding why. Sometimes they asked about Jesus. I told them what mattered, not how he fed thousands, but how he thanked a boy before the miracle. When people spoke his name, I listened. When they doubted, I understood. When they believed, I smiled. Because faith, I learned, does not shout, it offers. I returned to that hill once, long after the crowds were gone. The grass had grown back. The ground held no memory of baskets or feet, but I knelt anyway. "I still have nothing," I whispered, and somehow I knew that wasn't true. The kingdom didn't come like I expected. It came like bread, broken, shared, enough. I was never named, never written down, but I was part of the story. And if you're listening to this, so are you, because the smallest gift, placed in willing hands, can still feed the world. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. It helps more people hear stories of faith.